watching GSR, Africa's global platform. Dr. Oyelade and Fatima, welcome to my show.
Thank you for having us.
So let me start with you, Dr. Oyelade. How did CASA Foundation start for you?
CASA Foundation started as an initiative of a group of people, partners. I founded CASA Foundation, just to be clear. However, right up upon starting CASA Foundation, we invited a group of partners to come on board and talk about African economic development. Africans in diaspora, how they can contribute to the development of Africa, how we could replicate the gains and the benefits that we saw across North America in Africa by helping facilitating education, development of education, advancing education, relieving poverty across Africa, homeland. You always have a passion for that. And so that was how we all came together after the initiative of CASA Foundation started from me.
And what sparked it? Was this something that was going on wrong in Africa that you thought that, this foundation can push it and correct it?
Yes, indeed. I have actually always been passionate about African development. One, because of my background in investment banking and having funded various aspects of the banking sector in Africa. And so because we funded a lot of businesses, and we saw how those businesses started, how they were so passionate about running their businesses, and then there just appeared to be a deficit of systems and structures in place in Africa, such that some of the businesses that were funded actually collapsed in the process. And so I was a part of that. And I just, there was something fundamentally wrong in the structures. And we knew that either people had, they lacked the skills, the competencies, and all of those. And then they also had possibly mentorship deficits also in some aspects of their trajectory. And at the end of the day, we thought putting the platform together where people could gain skills and competencies from various experts across diverse professions might help people in that journey of setting up their businesses, of learning more, and all of those. So that was the initial concept of CASA Foundation. However, from what you can see, CASA Foundation has actually
grown,
evolved.
It's generated and evolved into something quite different. And that brings Fatima into the picture. You've been very instrumental in the organization of the Friends of Africa Economic Development Conference for 2016. You're from East Africa, I understand.
I am originally from Burundi.
Burundi.
Yes.
And why do you think it is so important for Africa, and especially Africans in the diaspora, to take such initiatives so seriously as we understand from Dr. Oyelade?
I grew up in Africa, and by Africa I mean I grew up in Burundi, Cameroon, Ivory Coast, and Zimbabwe.
4 countries?
4 countries.
Wow.
So I had the pleasure, the honor of actually calling myself an African, not just a Burundian. And with that, I grew up surrounded by women, a bit like Olu, and men who were thinking about advancing Africa and seeing Africa as something that can grow and can be big. I grew up within Africa that, yes, had its own little problems, but that was a land of opportunity, a land of growth, a land of you can write your own script because there's nothing written, there's nothing down. There are no structures, as she says, but with the right kind of information, with the right kind of tool, you can engineer, you can fabricate things that are absolutely unique and wonderfully created just for us. We're dynamic, we're interesting, we're different. And what we do is the same, and the way we do business is the same. We can't take models that are already established in the Western world and assume that they will work
in Africa.
In Africa. They need to be made for us, by us, with our input.
Let me be inquisitive a little bit.
Yes,
what took you to all these 4 countries?
My parents worked for the United Nations.
Wow, that's quite interesting.
Yes.
And so
they're civil servants at heart, they're doctors, and they believed in helping and saving lives. And my work is still about saving lives, especially in Africa.
The big question, which everybody's asking, why has it taken Africa so long, economically, to get to where it should be, to get to the level where CASA Foundation and Friends of Africa wants it to get to economically? Why has it taken Africa so long in doing that?
I believe we're being a little unfair. We all know our history. Europe was not built in less than 100 years. We're talking about the fact that Africa has started actually only getting the kind of education that is needed for the past 20 to 30 years. We're talking about generations that don't know how to read, access that is very limited. So once capacity is built, once people know what gets done is incredible. I mean, go to Nairobi now, go to Lagos, go to Dar es Salaam. Even look at Juba, what's happening in Juba right now. They just got their independence. The moment education, the moment knowledge is given, the sky is the limit, and the opportunities abound. So it hasn't taken that long. We're talking about Europe that was in the Middle Ages in the 1300s, and we forget the fact that it took them 800 years to figure out their own stuff. Yet we want Africa to grow and develop and become exactly clean and pristine within 20 to 30 years.
A lot of people talk about colonization and all, how it all, contributed. Take it or leave it. There's a new Africa growing up, a new Africa that is ready to accept the world as it is, that is ready to project its name to the rest of the world. And that is why it is so important for people like you, to be, especially in the diaspora, to push the agenda. Olu, so the focus of the Friends of Africa initiative, which was actually came out of the CASA Foundation, is to what? Bring Africans in the diaspora together to deliberate on economic affairs in Africa?
Indeed, that was the initial focus when the Friends of Africa Economic Development Conference was conceived in 2011, the first conference held, and the initial focus was on identifying the major benefits and the gains of infrastructure development, the rapid infrastructure development across North America, parts of Europe, and look to replicating those gains and benefits right across Africa. And so that was why we focused largely on bringing together the private sector practitioners, the leaders in government, ministers and governors of various states were brought to the Friends of Africa Economic Development Conferences between 2011 and 2014. And so that they could learn from their counterparts in North America and Canada, majorly Canada. And so we realized that it couldn't be limited to that, because the private sector itself plays a major role in economic development and business advancement and things like that.
Some tell me the engine of growth.
Yes, and so, gleaning into how the government works in Canada and how private sector works in Canada, we looked around, and from research we found that in fact 80% of the SMEs, the middle class people, entrepreneurs, actually, they run they run the economy of this developed nations. When you look at the developed nations, 80% small businesses, middle class people, entrepreneurs contribute about 30% in Canada alone, 30% to the GDP of Canada, 39% in the United States, another 53% in Germany, 79% in South Korea. And so if you look at the GDP and the way it works in these developed nations, then you find that Africa continues to lag behind. And so there is that school of thought that I belong to that believes Africa lags behind in this respect, because it's not been able to catch up with some of the other nations around it, in terms of economic development. And so the platform focuses on that, how you can actually bring together the professionals, diasporans, government parties, private sector practitioners, and have a deliberate, robust discussion about how we can advance. And it's not limited to the discussion of how you can advance economic development or infrastructure, how we can actually be participants, full participants and collaborators, co-creators as African businesses. Because the African businesses, when the government, discusses its agenda, because as you must remember, 80%, the government itself runs about 80% of the show in most African nations.
Yeah,
it's driven by government. And so when the agenda...
What government wants is what needs to be done.
Absolutely. So when it's done 80% that way, then you need to understand that until you bring in the private sector, until you bring in the professionals, until you bring in the entrepreneurs who will not only create new jobs, government can create all the jobs, so they create the new jobs, they pay the taxes, they generate revenue for you, they bring in the partnerships and the technical expertise. When you have all of this around the table, then we can actually have meaningful, extensive, meaningful deliberations that would dovetail into the kind of results we're looking for. And that's what Friends of Africa stands for. So it's no longer limited to the government sector. It's now shifted to the private sector, of course with collaboration of the government, and that's why we always have government representation. And we believe that's a more effective way of actually impacting socially and economically.
Having government involved, no two
Yes,
ways about that.
absolutely.
When we return, I would actually want to know about the sub-theme of this year's conference, creating capital for development. How easy has it been, in putting this together, conference together? Who are the key speakers, for the upcoming event? And most importantly, what are we doing to drive Africa to support an initiative like that? We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to GSR, Africa's global platform. We're actually talking about the Friends of Africa FOA 2016. It's an economic development conference happening right here in Toronto, Canada. Dr. Oyelade and Fatima are my guests today. So Fatima, let me start with you this time. It's been an amazing story for East Africa, no two ways about that. Look, the success story of Rwanda, for example, is what people keep talking about. This is a country that went through terrible moments with regards to civil war. We remember the genocide that saw about 800,000 Tutsis and moderate Hutus killed. But just within a twinkle of an eye, Rwanda is one of Africa's success story in terms of economic development. Your own country, Burundi, might have also experienced its own, ups and downs with regards to civil war and all that. But tell me, what do you think is really projecting the success story that we're hearing from East Africa today?
Well, it stems from the biggest and most expensive riches of Africa. It's people. It's as simple as
The
that.
resilience.
The people, their creativity, their resilience. I'm afraid to use that because it's not about resilience. We are who we are. We are a people who are capable, who are intelligent, who are able to do miracles once we get our minds to it. And leadership is very important. Rwanda is doing well because it's got the leadership that it has and the people that it has. I was recently in Kigali and it's buzzing with entrepreneurship. The leadership, the government has provided an environment where people can actually do what they can do, but the middle class, to piggyback on what Olu was talking about, it's about the middle class that's building the businesses. They're the people who are going to work every single day to build their country. I mean, East Africa is growing, and we're growing because of our people. Yes, we have the government, the private government and individual partnerships that are growing East Africa as it is. And you haven't seen anything yet.
Wow.
We have a
More
lot
to
of
come, right?
surprises, a lot to come.
So Olu, let's take a look at Eastern Africa and Western Africa. I mean, we can do the economic comparisons and all that, but from all indications, if you look at the economic indications coming out of Nigeria, for example, coming out of Ghana, for example, it looks like West Africa is not doing so well, at least for the past 10 years, as compared to East Africa. It is doing well, it is better with regards to economies and everything, but what do you think that West Africa can learn from the Eastern style of job creation and doing things? Because I know she mentioned, for example, entrepreneurship, which is actually now booming in West Africa as well.
Yeah, a major factor that I believe must actually be reviewed is the resource, reliance on specific resources. When you look at specific nations, you call them the oil-reliant nations, particularly Nigeria and Angola. You see they've been worst hit by the economic crisis that West Africa is now faced with, Nigeria being the major driver of that economy. The reformist nations.
But the funny thing is that people inside will not term it economic crisis. They would say that they're doing well, comparatively better than before.
Beg to disagree a little now, because Nigeria only on the 2nd of September, if I'm correct, declared an economic recession. That economy is actually in a recession now, and that's. To say the least, pathetic, because Nigeria shouldn't be in this current situation.
No.
It shouldn't have been in the current situation. You find that in some of these countries where you have a looming crisis or an actual crisis, you find that the major issue is a failure to build systems and structures when the opportunities came.
Failure on the part of
failure on
people,
part of the government,
government,
because the government drives most of the structures. Systems are put in place by the government, regulatory frameworks are put in place by governments of nations, and then the people comply. But that's the way it's supposed to be, and that's why you have governance, and that's why you have government. And so when there is a failure, then then the system collapses, because there are no proper structures, sustainable structures to ride for the successes recorded, to ride on such platforms. And so that's what you have. That's the situation that has happened.
Big question. Why don't people in the diaspora, like yourself, like Fatima, keep advising people back home to get things done right?
This is a place to start from. We believe in our own little way. You set up a platform with the collaboration of experts in the community and in the various diverse sectors that you work with, and then you invite the very government officials to come and listen to what's going on in other parts of the world, global leaders, practitioners, CEOs of large corporations, the F500 companies, they're all there on that platform. And so you share ideas. That's why you have a platform like the Friends of Africa, which is a platform for the development of ideas, business ideas, economic ideas that can sustain nations. What has Canada done to get it to its current position in the Committee of Nations? How can Nigeria, how can Ghana borrow from what Canada has done, replicate it back in that country, and ensure that the private sector complies, and then create a positive atmosphere, a positive environment, well regulated, where the private sector can confidently participate in the development of the economy. Look at Ghana. I look at what's going on in Ghana. Ghana, for instance, because you asked us to do a comparative analysis.
Yes.
Ghana, for instance, went into the market and raised bonds about 3 years ago. Bonds at about a little over 7%. The bonds that Ghana raised only about a year ago, Ghana was heading back to the same market to raise another set of bonds. And this time, it was offered to them at 12%. Wow. 12% from 7%. What that tells you, from our simple understanding of the mathematics of that, is that you are higher risk.
Yeah.
Because they're only willing to lend to you at 12%, not 7%. Of course, Ghana has turned that down. But there are serious implications for that. Rwanda was able to raise its own bond. Its government bonds was raised at lower than 8%. And so that's priced as a much lower risk than Ghana. So when you look at the comparatives, and that's because, to my mind, it's a mixed economy. A mixed economy is where you are producing and you have various generators, resources that you get your revenues from. You're not relying on a simple resource or a single resource. You're not oil dependent. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Because it could be a curse at some point.
Yeah. They say oil is a blessing or a curse. In most cases, it's a curse. If you look at what is happening, for example, within the Nigerian nation, Boko Haram, it all came out as a result of the discovery of oil. In Ghana, for example, which is a good success story because a lot of infrastructure are being put in place in those regions and those areas that oil was actually discovered. Fatima,
yes.
Creating capital for development,
yes.
Afro investors.
Yes.
How is this achievable?
We need to bring, as Olu keeps saying, the government, private entities, and individuals, especially us. This is a platform for the diaspora, for business-minded diaspora who are looking at Africa to come together, share opportunities, discuss, come up with solutions, and create incredible projects. I think Olu can speak a little bit more about the water park project that came out of A4A.
Yes, we'll talk about that in Nigeria. I know about that.
And so things like that are being done coming out of this platform. We are creating capital for development and growth. Development means growth. We are bringing together our own capital and raising the continent.
It's interesting, Olu, because on the day of the conference itself, my understanding, my team are going to be there to set up a discussion like this, to bring to the fore and let the world know what is happening, not behind closed doors, openly. People are invited. People are signing up to be at the FOA 2016. But tell me briefly, who are the main speakers for this year's event? And why the choice of those speakers?
Right. For some time now, for too long, I believe that most of the platforms created around us, most that we participate at, we realize that there's a lot of discussion on African development. There's a lot of discussion on entrepreneur development, African development, business ideas passing from place to place. However, I realize that there's a major missing line, and that is how can people create capital? How do they get some capital, some form of capital to fund their dreams? People have a lot of ideas. In fact, if you ask a lot of people, what are the challenges of Africa today? I'm sure even a 12-year-old can actually tell you what the challenges of Africa are. And so we do have a fair idea of what those are. However, this platform is created and conceived to bring about discussions, robust discussions by people who have done it before, who are on a journey of development. They've created businesses, they've created initiatives, and some of those initiatives are actually turning out well, and they become employers of labor. And so because we believe they're employers of labor, they want to share some insights on how they got on this journey and how they have moved through this journey. And so those are the type of people that we have invited to share their ideas with us. Michael Kotu, for instance, is
that's the Minister of Youth and
the Minister of Youth and Children in Ontario, Canada, is representing his government to share ideas on how the diasporans can actually contribute to economic development by starting from where they are. You see, if you want to do something back there, start and let's see what you can do here. And then based on that, possibly you might be able to raise people who believe in you, with whom you've done a few transactions, to now replicate the gains of what you've done here back homeland. You know, people talk about, I want to take my initiatives back to my homeland, and which is very good, and which is what this is about. However, where you are, you need to start something good, and then let's see how that turns out, and then take it from there. So he will be speaking to us on the business ideas, how you can generate your ideas, and how you can fund your ideas. And so we have a team of people coming from there. And then we have representatives from the public sector. Yeah. We have the Ghana ambassador speaking to us, Dr. Sule Gariba. We'll be speaking about the opportunities in Ghana and the positive, the process that facilitates business registration, how the embassy can assist you to develop your ideas. And then we also have all kinds of, we have the president of the Toronto Portland Authority.
All coming.
Toronto Portland Authority controls over 400 hectares of land downtown Toronto there. Yeah. However, you find that it's no longer available. So when you run out of land, where else is there to go?
You have to get out of Toronto.
Where else do you need to go? So he will be coming to talk about a new initiative of the Ontario government called the Air Rights. Air Rights, where you build in the air. A lot of people haven't heard about. We're bringing people like that to talk about this. I will be speaking myself also about some of the initiatives that we've been able to glean from the various Friends of Africa Economic Development Conferences.
Interesting. So let's take a quick break, and when we return, I want to ask a very simple question. Is this conference, regarding the names that you've mentioned, regarding the fact that the theme is creating capital for development, will it be okay for an ordinary person like me to come to a conference and understand it, and to what benefit? I want to find that out when we return. We'll be right back. Welcome back to GSR, Africa's global platform, also live on Afro Global Television here in Canada, and also on Joy News in Ghana, West Africa, broadcasting on DSTV. So, Olu and Fatima, my understanding, and the initial question that I wanted to know before we went on this break, is this conference open to the general public?
Right, indeed. The conference is actually open to the general public, business people, professionals, entrepreneurs, innovators, students, young people, emerging leaders, people just coming out, and people who actually work as professionals and are looking to do some business on the side because they have a business idea that they would like to flourish. And so it's open to the general public of all gender, And in fact, when you talk about the general public, there's a segment of the conference that leads us to, it's called the Entrepreneur Exchange. We've always had a session for young people, young professionals, young entrepreneurs. And so this year it's actually tagged Entrepreneur Exchange. And the whole idea of the Entrepreneur Exchange is, as you well know, Africa itself, the population of Africa the young population of Africa is about 40% of the entire larger population. And you cannot ignore the young population.
Which is expected to go higher.
And it's expected to go higher. So when you look at the Entrepreneur Exchange, it's not targeted towards the young people alone. It's about all entrepreneurs. However, the focus this year will be on young people. Why? Because we find that there are a lot of young people doing big things. When we say big things, it's not by size, it's by the quantum of the idea itself, what they're doing, and the impact that they are making. If you look at Fatima beside me, Fatima is actually executive director of Mazava, and Mazava is actually a group of doctors and nurses and people who save lives in East Africa. Yet she has a job that she does right here in Canada, Toronto. Yeah. We have a lot of young people like that working with us, even at FOA. And so upon discovering this, we realized that there is a need to actually bring the young people also together, to bring up the ideas and help them to bring about the kind of ideas, the business ideas they have and their dreams.
Quick question. Yeah. Does the example of Fatima
yes.
being here in North America and owning a business back in Africa, does it correct the initial notion that people had that, the exodus of the brain drain of people leaving Africa into North America and Europe and all those places and creating the brain drain in Africa? Does it resolve that? The fact that they can still be here and have businesses back home?
Absolutely, yeah.
Job creation?
Absolutely, it corrects that notion. Because it absolutely corrects that notion because your geography is actually not your destiny. Mm-hmm. Your geography cannot be your destiny. You can do anything from anywhere. Destiny itself is about your vision, what you're thinking in your head, the purpose that is driving the vision, and the actions that you put on the purpose that you have. It is not what has been created for you already. It's not about what has been created for you. And so the young people need to understand this, and that's why we called it Entrepreneur Exchange. They need to listen to people, they need to find out what they're doing, they need to understand that the myths that by staying here or having a 9-to-5 job, you really can't do this or you really can pursue other things is totally wrong. They need to understand that. And we have a group of people, young entrepreneurs that have done successfully well, coming from a lot of the corporate, we have a lot of people across the region. From the banks, we have a few young people, Africans, Caucasians, that have been invited to speak to our young people because they have various initiatives that they're promoting across Canada and also back in Africa. And people need to learn from the gains.
Is this something that is quite doable by others as well? Being in North America and then still owning your own business back in Africa?
I believe that it's even better because then you get access through your connections back home and through connections that you make here. You get access to knowledge, you get access to capacity, you get access to so much more that you can then use to leapfrog into so much more. I am much more interested in healthcare as well as tech. I'm really into tech, and a lot of young people in Africa are very much into tech.
Because the traditional way of doing things have changed. I mean, when you go into laboratories now, everything is quite technical.
Absolutely.
The doctors are having their surgery. They're not by the person. They're on the computer doing stuff.
Absolutely. That's happening in North America as well as in South Africa. Actually, they're advancing very strongly on that. But we're talking about business that's being run on a cell phone now. Paper is almost dead.
Yeah.
Nobody's behind their laptop working. They're on the cell phone. It can be
This is only a substitute. Everything is here, right?
Everything is there.
Yeah.
Some people need slightly bigger screens, but the point is, at the end of the day, you don't need much more than this to conduct business. You're connected to everyone. We have projects like the one in Kenya where you can check on your crops from Nairobi while your crops are somewhere in rural Kenya. You know how much rain fell on it, you know how much they're growing, you know how much sun they got, you know exactly what's happening with you. You have M-Pesa. You can send money from one place, the EcoCash. Africa is advancing in a way that has nothing to do with what has been before, and thank God for that. It's a new world, and the youth, the entrepreneurs, they're embracing it, and we're using technology to do that.
Wow. Fatima, many thanks. And Doctor, thank you very much for joining us today on GSR. But even before we go, I mean, there may be viewers, people watching the show and may want to attend the conference. Where did they go? What's the website? It is scrolling on our screen, but can you amplify it for us with your voice.
Yes, for those who wish to join us at the Friends of Africa Economic Development Conference, happening on the 8th of October 2016, 8 a.m. sharp, the Marriott Hotel Conference Center, Toronto Airport. You need to get on www.casafoundation.ca, and the registration button will be right on it to click on that. You click on it and register today. The conference affords you various opportunities to share your business ideas. The president of the stock exchange of Barbados, which is a country, will be there to discuss with you all the platforms and initiatives to raise capital. Of course, obviously, you will need to have something of your own that you've saved for the rainy day, and then they will give you an opportunity to look for opportunities to fund your businesses. Various other speakers are there to share economic trends, business ventures that you should be looking at, doing now at this particular time. They will be there to share that with you. People who have already, executed their own dreams by creating new businesses that they presented at the Friends of Africa previous platforms, they are also on the platform this session. And they will be sharing with you what they presented, how they got their funding, and what they did, and what those businesses are about. You will get to meet with these people through the networking sessions, and we encourage you to register today and be there with us.
Interesting, because in 2015,
yes,
I was at the conference.
You were there, Jeff.
I saw the diversity that comes with it. People from Eastern Africa, from Northern Africa, from Southern Africa, from Europe, all being there, sharing their ideas, how to develop the continent of Africa in terms of business and development and all that. Olu, I really appreciate your time for joining me today on GSR.
Thank you very much.
And Fatima, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
This has been GSR, Africa's global platform on Joy News in Ghana and also on Afro Global Television here in North America. See you next week.